If you're watching this right now, chances are you're either trying to fall asleep, calm your mind, or you just really enjoy learning about people who lived extremely cold lives while you're wrapped up in a warm blanket. Either way, welcome. Tonight, we're taking a slow, gentle walk into a world that most of us can barely imagine. A world of deep silence, long winters, and snow that probably made people question every life decision they ever made. But back then, they didn't have much of a choice. Snowy regions were home, whether they liked it or not. So, take a deep breath. Let the world around you get quiet. Imagine that soft crunch of snow under your shoes and the cool air brushing past your face. That's where we're going, far back into the frozen past, where daily life was simple, tough, and strangely calming to think about. Long before heaters, winter jackets, and the magical invention of hot chocolate, people had to figure out how to live in places where the snow didn't just fall, it stayed. It lived there full time. Some regions got snow the way some people get sunlight, consistently, ruthlessly, every single year. But even with all that cold, people still woke up every day, stretched their frozen limbs, and went about their routines like it was totally normal. Imagine waking up inside a small hut made of wood, animal skins, or if you lived in the far north, even blocks of ice. Before you opened your eyes, you'd already know the temperature because your lungs would politely inform you, "Hey, it's freezing in here." There was no snooze button in ancient snowy lands. If you didn't get up to fix the fire simply went out. And when the fire went out, well, let's just say nobody enjoyed that. But people back then weren't complaining. They were used to the quiet and the cold. In fact, the silence of snowy regions was something special. No cars, no machines, no phones, no notification sounds. Just the gentle whisper of wind sliding across the snow and the occasional sound of someone outside stepping on ice and instantly regretting it. And the landscape? Oh, the landscape. Imagine endless white, stretching in every direction. Trees coated with snow like someone sprinkled flour over the whole world. Mountains covered in thick blankets of ice that shimmered under the pale winter sun. Even the sky felt quieter. It had a soft, sleepy feeling to it, like the clouds themselves were tired of holding all that snow. But behind all this calm beauty was a simple truth. Surviving here was not easy, not even close. Yet, people did it every single day. They learned the secret rhythm of the frozen world. They knew which winds meant bad weather, which footprints meant a food source, and which cracking sounds in the ice meant, hey, maybe don't walk there. But here's the thing. Even though daily life was hard, it wasn't always dramatic. Most days were slow and steady. People focused on small tasks, fixing tools, tending fires, preparing food, checking on their animals, and making sure their shelters didn't turn into ice sculptures overnight. And that's what makes this a perfect topic for sleep. There's something oddly relaxing about imagining slow, simple routines from a time when life was basic, quiet, and honest. No rush, no deadlines, no emails. Just survival, patience, and a lot of snow. So, in this first chapter, we're just introducing the mood, the feeling of stepping into an ancient frozen world. Picture yourself in a tiny, snow-covered village. The sun is barely rising, making the sky look soft and bluish. Smoke curls slowly from a few huts as people try to warm their morning fires. Everything moves at a gentle pace. Nobody's running. Nobody's stressed. Everyone is just doing what needs to be done, one careful step at a time. And the silence? Oh, that silence is the star of the show. Modern life is loud. Cars driving, phones buzzing, people talking, machines humming. But in ancient snowy regions, you could walk for hours and hear nothing but your own breath. Imagine that. Your footsteps crunching softly, your breath forming tiny clouds, the snow beneath you stretching on forever. You'd probably start hearing your own thoughts echo back at you, hopefully the positive ones. People who lived in these areas weren't dramatic heroes from movies. They were normal folks, just trying to stay warm, make food, and keep life moving. They didn't think of themselves as brave or special. They were simply part of the land, learning from it, respecting it, and sometimes, yes, being bullied by the weather. But still, they pushed through. And as we begin this journey, we're going to explore what life was truly like for them, how they built homes out of almost nothing, how they kept warm when the sun disappeared for days, how they hunted and fished when everything was frozen, and how they found small moments of peace and even happiness in a world covered by snow. Think of this chapter as the warm-up, the quiet walk to the door of history before we step inside. The snow around us is deep. The wind is cold but soft, and even though the world is frozen, there's a deep calm in knowing that people survived here for thousands of years, slowly, patiently, one chilly day at a time. So as you continue listening, whether you're fully awake, half asleep, or fighting sleep with all your might, just relax. Let the snowy world settle in your mind. The cold of the past is far away now. You're safe, warm, and ready to drift into this story like a feather falling on fresh snow. Before we dive deeper into the daily routines of ancient folks living in snowy regions, we need to understand the world they lived in. And trust me, it was cold. Not, oh, I forgot my jacket cold. No, this was, why did I choose to be born here cold? The kind of cold that greets you at the door like a strict school principal. But the strange thing is, it was also beautiful, quiet, peaceful in a way that modern life rarely is. So in this chapter, let's take a slow, gentle walk through the land itself, its climate, its landscape, and the endless sea of snow that shaped every moment of ancient life. Imagine waking up and stepping outside your hut. The world around you is completely white, like someone dropped an entire bag of flour on the planet and walked away. Snow doesn't just appear here. It settles in, like it signed a long-term rental agreement with nature. The sky above is a soft gray, and sometimes it feels like the sun doesn't even want to show up for work. In many snowy regions, the winters were so long that people joked, well, maybe not joked, but possibly complained politely, that summer was just a rumor started by optimistic travelers. But let's slow down and imagine the feeling. The air is crisp, so crisp that every breath feels like you're sipping cold mint tea. The wind is gentle for now, but it carries stories from the mountains. And speaking of mountains, there were plenty. Some ancient snowy regions were surrounded by tall, silent mountains wearing white coats of snow. These giants watched over the people below, their peaks hidden in clouds. Other snowy regions were wide, open tundras, flat land stretching so far that if you squinted, you might see absolutely nothing, just more snow. And then there were the forests. Thick pine trees heavy with snow, branches bending like they were tired but too polite to complain. When the wind passed through these forests, it made the softest sound. Not scary, not loud, just a gentle hush like nature whispering, "Relax, everything is slow here." But let's talk about the cold, the type of cold that shaped every part of ancient life. Temperatures in these places dropped so low that even the air seemed to freeze. Lakes and rivers turned into giant sheets of glass, perfectly still. People had to walk across them sometimes, hoping the ice didn't decide to play a prank. Even the ground felt different. Snow piled up in layers. Sometimes it was soft and fluffy. Sometimes it was packed hard like frozen cotton. And sometimes it was so icy that one wrong step turned into an accidental dance routine. But despite all this, the people living here adapted, slowly, carefully, and with a lot of patience. Now think about the light. In some places, winter days were short, very short. The sun would rise late, yawn, look around, and then go right back down. Darkness ruled most of the day. And not the scary kind of darkness, more like a calm, deep shade that made fires glow even brighter. On the other hand, in some far northern areas, winter had something called the polar night. Weeks or even months where the sun didn't appear at all. Imagine that. Waking up, working, eating, and going to sleep all in darkness. People relied on firelight, the moon, and their memory to move around. Losing your mitten in the dark was basically the ancient version of losing your phone in a movie theater. But even with such long nights, life didn't stop. People kept moving through their routines, guided by the soft glow of fires and lamps made from animal fat. Everything had a quiet rhythm to it. And then there were the sounds. Or should I say, the lack of sounds. Snowy lands were naturally peaceful. The snow absorbed noise, so even loud footsteps became muted. A village that might have been full of activity felt calm, like everything was wrapped in a warm, fluffy blanket of silence. When the wind picked up, it created little snow swirls that danced across the ground. Sometimes people describe the wind as having its own personality. Gentle one moment, dramatic the next. A bit like a diva of nature. And storms? Well, storms were something else. Snowstorms turned the world white. You couldn't see more than a few steps ahead. People stayed indoors, listened to the wind, and hoped their roofs didn't suddenly decide to quit their job. But storms also had a strange beauty. When they ended, the whole world looked fresh and untouched. Snow formed soft curves on rooftops, the air felt cleaner, even the light seemed brighter when it reflected off the fresh snow. Now, let's talk about how this weather shaped everything people did. Food, homes, travel, clothing, every part of life depended on understanding the land and the climate. If someone didn't pay attention, winter would remind them very quickly that nature was the boss. People learned to watch the sky. A certain shade of gray might mean snow was coming. A sudden drop in temperature might mean a storm was near. And a strong wind from the north usually meant, brace yourself, it's going to be a long night. But even with all the challenges, the ancient frozen world had a calming effect. There was no rush, no need to hurry. Everything took time. Gathering wood? Slow. Walking across snow? Slow. Fishing through ice? Very slow. Basically, the ancient frozen world was nature's way of saying, take it easy, move gently, you're not going anywhere fast. And strangely, that slow pace helped shape peaceful communities. People depended on each other. They shared warmth, food, tools, and stories. They found beauty in simple moments, sunlight sparkling on ice, snowflakes falling in perfect silence, or steam rising from a warm bowl of soup. So, as we look at this frozen world, cold, quiet, beautiful, we start to understand why life here was different. Hard, yes, but also calm. Deeply
calm. And now that we've explored the land itself, we're ready to step into the lives of the people who called it home, how they lived, worked, ate, and survived in a world ruled by winter.
Now that we've explored the quiet, snowy world itself, let's meet the people who lived in it. Not famous kings or big warriors or anyone who wore shiny metal armor. No, no. The people of these frozen lands were simple, everyday folks. The kind of people who woke up, stretched, checked their fire, and said something like, "Wow, still cold," every single day. These were early tribes, families, and small groups who settled in snowy regions because, well, sometimes life doesn't give you a choice. Some were nomadic, moving slowly across icy landscapes like very patient travelers. Others built small villages and decided, "Yep, this is home. Let's try not to freeze." Let's take a slow walk through the different types of people who lived here. First, imagine small tribes made up of a few families. They didn't have big houses or fancy tools. They had simple shelters made from wood, animal skins, bones, and snow. Their whole world was their tribe, maybe 20, 30, or 40 people. Everyone knew everyone. And privacy, well, that didn't really exist. If someone sneezed loudly, the whole tribe probably turned around. These tribes depended heavily on each other. Life in the frozen world wasn't something you did alone. You needed your family, your neighbors, and sometimes even that one uncle who always complained but still chopped wood better than everyone else. Every person had a role. Some hunted, some cooked, some made tools, some watched over the children, and together they kept the tribe running. Many of these groups were hunter-gatherers. That basically means they followed the food. When animals moved south, they moved south. When the fish were plenty, they stayed near rivers or frozen lakes. Their homes were portable, their belongings were few, and their routines were simple. It was a slow life, but also a smart life. They understood the land better than anyone. Then there were the settled communities. These were slightly larger groups, maybe 50 to 200 people, who decided to stay in one place. They built sturdier shelters and created small villages where everyone had their own tasks. Imagine tiny houses lined up in the snow, smoke rolling gently from chimneys, and children playing outside wearing 10 layers of clothing like walking marshmallows. These settlements often formed near good resources, places where animals were common, where the snow was not too deep, or where there was a river that didn't freeze completely. If they were lucky, they even had a little sunlight during winter, just a little. Now let's talk about how these people lived together. Community was everything. In the frozen world, a single person couldn't survive easily, but a group? A group had strength. One person collected wood, another watched the fire, another prepared food, another made clothing, and so on. It was teamwork on a level that would make modern office workers cry with joy. There were no clocks, no schedules pinned on a wall, and no alarms. Life followed nature's rhythm.
Wake up when the light appears. Sleep when the darkness becomes too deep. Work when you must. Rest when you can. People didn't rush. Rushing on ice usually led to slipping, and slipping led to becoming the entertainment of the day. These early people were also incredibly skilled. They could look at a snow track and tell you what animal passed, how long ago, and whether it was worth chasing. They could feel the wind and know if a storm was coming. They could build a shelter from almost nothing. They didn't have Google Maps, but somehow they always knew where they were. Let's slow down and imagine a typical tribe member. Maybe he's a hunter. He wakes up, stretches, puts on layers of warm clothing, and steps outside into the cold. He checks the sky, looks at the tracks near the village, and heads into the forest or across the tundra. His walk is quiet. His breath forms soft clouds in the air. His eyes scan the snow for clues. Or maybe she's a craftsperson. She spends her day sewing warm clothing from animal hides, shaping bone tools, or fixing sleds. Her hands are steady, her movements slow and careful. The fire burns beside her, giving her just enough warmth to keep working. Or maybe they're a child. They're learning everything slowly. How to respect nature, how to stay warm, and how to help the tribe. Children didn't have toys like we do today, but they made their own fun. Snow was their playground. They built little snow shapes, played games, and learned skills by watching adults. Childhood was simple, quiet, and full of tiny adventures. And the elders were the heart of the community. They were the storytellers, the keepers of wisdom, the ones who remembered the winters that were colder than usual. They sat near the fire and told calm stories that mixed history, lessons, and maybe a little bit of exaggeration. But that made the stories better. Elders didn't rush. Their words drifted slowly, like snowflakes falling. So, when we talk about the people of ancient snowy lands, we're talking about communities built on cooperation, patience, and understanding. Life was slow, peaceful, and deeply connected to nature. And even though they faced the cold every single day, they lived with a strength and calmness that's hard to find in today's busy world. Now that we've met the people, in the next chapter, we'll explore where they lived, how they built their homes, kept warm, and stayed cozy in a world made of ice and snow.
If you've ever walked outside on a winter morning and thought, "Ooh, it's too cold, I'm going back inside," then congratulations. You already understand the main goal of ancient snowy region architecture. Don't freeze. Simple, but very important. Homes in these frozen places weren't built to look pretty or fancy. There were no stylish windows, no decorations, and definitely no heating systems that you could set to nice and warm. These shelters were built with one mission in mind: survive the cold every single day. Let's take a slow, cozy look at what these ancient homes were like. The first rule of ancient snow homes: use what you have. People didn't have hardware stores. No one could walk in and say, "Hi, I'd like 10 wooden beams and a heating system, please." Instead, they used whatever nature provided: wood, bones, stones, snow, ice, and animal skins. Different groups used different materials depending on where they lived. In the far north, snow and ice were the main building materials. Yes, ice. When it's cold enough, ice becomes as strong as stone. In forestry areas, people used logs and branches. In open tundra regions, they used bones, driftwood, and thick layers of animal hides. Basically, every home was a teamwork project between humans and the environment. Snow houses. Cozy, warm, and not as cold as you think. One of the most famous types of shelters was the snow house. Yes, the igloos. And before you imagine people living in blocks of ice shivering all night, snow houses were surprisingly warm inside. Snow is actually a great insulator. It traps heat. So, once the entrance was blocked with snow and the body heat of the people and fire warmed the inside, the temperature could become comfortable. Imagine crawling into a dome of packed snow. The outside world is freezing and silent, but inside, the sound is soft, the air is warmer, and the firelight reflects off the smooth walls, making everything feel calm and peaceful. No sharp winds, no snow hitting your face, just pure, quiet stillness. Wooden huts, small, strong, and packed with warmth. In areas with plenty of trees, people built wooden huts. They weren't tall or spacious. If you walked in too quickly, you might bump your head, but they were strong. These huts were built low to the ground to keep in the heat. People covered the roofs with thick snow or sod, grass and soil, to make them even warmer. No empty space was wasted. Every corner had a purpose. Inside, the fire sat in the center. Smoke traveled upward and escaped through a small hole in the roof. Sometimes the smoke didn't escape fast enough, and the whole home smelled like a barbecue, but at least it was warm. The floor was covered with layers of animal skins, wool or fur, soft branches from pine trees, all to keep people comfortable and prevent the cold from creeping in through the ground. Bone and hide shelters were surprisingly clever. In open tundra regions, wood was rare. You couldn't just say, "Let me grab a log." The land was flat, windy, and open, so people used what they had. Usually bones from large animals. Massive ribs from hunted animals, like mammoths long ago, could be arranged into a strong frame. Then the frame was covered with thick hides, layered several times for insulation. Snow was added on top to seal in warmth. These shelters looked like small, rounded hills, perfectly blended into the winter landscape. They were warm, sturdy, and easy to repair. If a section got damaged, people simply patched it with more hide. How they heated their homes. Now let's answer the important question, how did they stay warm? They didn't have radiators or heating vents. Instead, they used, primarily, fire pits. Usually placed in the center of the home, fires were small, not because people wanted to save firewood, but because big fires made the roof melt. And trust me, nobody wants a roof made of snow to melt above their head. Also, stone lamps, common in Arctic regions. These small lamps burned animal fat, giving off both light and warmth. The smell wasn't always pleasant, but ancient people probably didn't complain. They were grateful anything was warm. And lastly, body heat. People slept close together to share warmth. Family members, children, and even sometimes pets all cuddled near the same warm area. If you've ever slept with a warm cat or dog, you understand the concept perfectly. Inside the home, a peaceful, warm place. Let's step inside one of these homes and imagine what it feels like. The entrance is low, so you crawl in. This helps keep warm air inside and cold air outside. As soon as you enter, the world changes. The wind disappears. The silence softens. The air is warmer. You take off your snowy boots and step onto soft layers of fur. Inside, it's small, dim, and cozy. The fire flickers gently. Pots hang above it, warming food slowly. People sit close, talking softly, repairing tools or weaving clothing. Children play quietly with small wooden toys or carved bones. Elders sit near the warmest spot, telling stories or simply watching the fire. It feels like the world outside doesn't matter. The cold, the snow, the storms, they can all stay out there. Inside this little shelter, there is peace, warmth, and family. Daily maintenance, keeping the house alive. Homes didn't just sit there doing nothing. They needed care, daily care. People checked the roof to make sure snow wasn't too heavy, repaired cracks where cold air slipped in, added fresh skins or branches if insulation got thin, and carefully managed the fire so it didn't go out. If the fire died in the middle of the night, someone had to get up, usually the person who lost the argument the night before, and restart it. These homes were simple, but full of life. The beauty of simple living. The homes may not win any design awards today, but they were perfect for their time. They were warm, safe, and built with pure effort and wisdom passed down for generations. People didn't need large houses. They didn't need fancy decor. They needed a place where the family could stay warm, eat, rest, and survive the long winter nights. And somehow, those tiny homes felt full of heart. In a world covered with ice and silence, these shelters were small islands of warmth and life, glowing softly against the endless snow.
Morning in ancient snowy lands was, well, let's just say it was brisk. And when I say brisk, I mean your breath instantly becomes a cloud, your nose feels like it's having a private protest, and your fingers wonder if they still belong to your body brisk. But for the people living here, this was normal. Every day, no snooze buttons, no coffee, no heated blankets, just cold, quiet mornings that demanded attention. So, let's slowly step into one of these mornings and see what life looked like when the sun barely peeked over the horizon. The gentle alarm, nature itself. Ancient people didn't have alarm clocks. Instead, nature did the job for them. The light of dawn, soft and pale, slowly crept into their huts. The temperature dropping even more made it impossible to stay cozy under skins. And sometimes the sounds of animals, snow crunching, birds, or distant howls, gently nudged them awake. Some mornings were calm and quiet. Others, especially before a storm, nature seemed impatient. But either way, the day had begun. Stretching the frozen limbs. After waking, the first challenge was simple: moving without feeling like frozen sticks. People often stretched slowly, shook their hands and feet, and rubbed limbs to bring some warmth back. It's a funny thought, stretching in layers of fur like a tiny sleepy snow monster. But it worked. The goal wasn't to look graceful. The goal was to feel alive enough to handle the day. And then, the first step out of the hut, that's the real test. The cold hit immediately, reminding you that staying in bed was impossible. Some probably muttered soft words or growled quietly to motivate themselves. Survival requires motivation, and a little grumbling helps. Tending the fire. No matter what time they woke, the fire always came first. If it had died overnight, someone carefully rekindled it using flint, dry moss, and patience. If it was still burning, they gently fed it small sticks or animal fat lamps to keep it warm. The fire wasn't just warmth, it was life. Without it, mornings would be unbearable. With it, the hut became a tiny island of comfort in a frozen sea. Imagine sitting by the flickering flames, breathing in the smoky scent of burning wood or fat, and watching tiny sparks float upward. In a world of snow and ice, this was their sun, their heat, their heart. Checking on the animals. In snowy regions, animals were critical. Livestock provided food, fur, and companionship. So one of the first morning tasks was checking on them. Herds of reindeer or goats needed to be counted and moved to safe spots. Dogs might have been harnessed for sleds, ready for errands or hunting. Even small animals trapped for food or fur had to be checked carefully. It was a slow, methodical process, step by step. No rushing. In fact, rushing usually led to slipping in the snow or losing a mitten. Morning food preparation. Breakfast wasn't about pancakes or coffee. It was about survival fuel. Sometimes people ate preserved meat or dried fish. Sometimes they had stored berries or grains. Often, they melted snow over the fire for drinking water. The goal wasn't culinary delight. It was warmth and energy for the long, cold day ahead. And yes, they probably ate quietly, savoring whatever little comfort food they could make. Even a warm bite tastes like heaven in freezing weather. Personal care, the snow edition. Hygiene was important, but let's be honest, showers didn't exist. Washing meant brushing teeth with sticks or small tools, rinsing with a little melted snow or ice, scraping off layers of frost and grime. And then there was clothing, layering thick furs, hides, and sometimes woven fabrics to protect against the cold. Every piece had a purpose. Every layer mattered. And if one layer wasn't warm enough, someone could be seriously regretting a hasty morning decision. Planning the day. Once a week, fed and clothed, mornings included slow planning. Hunters discussed where they'd go. Gatherers checked which frozen rivers might yield fish. Craftspeople inspected tools and materials for repairs. Children learned by watching adults quietly. Life was structured, but not rushed. The rhythm was gentle, almost meditative. Every action, no matter how small, mattered, and everything had a purpose. Morning walks and tasks. Even a short walk outside could feel like a little adventure. People carefully stepped over snow, checked tracks, or gathered firewood nearby. The quiet of a snowy morning, birds barely singing, and snow muffling most sound, created a calm, almost hypnotic environment. Life was slow, intentional, and surprisingly peaceful, despite the cold. It was a way of life that required patience, calmness, and a little humor, because sometimes all you could do was laugh quietly as you pulled frozen socks over frozen toes. By the end of the morning, the tribe was ready for the day. The fire burned steadily, food was prepared, clothes were layered, tools were ready, and everyone had moved, slowly but surely, into the rhythm of daily life. Next up, we'll explore how these people found food in such a frozen world, how they hunted, gathered, and prepared meals, the slow, careful, fascinating ways they survived in the snow.
Morning routines naturally led into the day's most important task, finding food. In ancient snowy lands, meals weren't taken for granted. There were no grocery stores, no canned soups, no delivery apps. People had to rely entirely on the land, the animals, and their own skill to survive. And yet they did it, slowly, carefully, and with a quiet kind of patience that seems almost meditative now. Hunting was central. Men, women, and sometimes older children would prepare for the day with care. The clothing had to be just right, not too heavy, not too loose, and the tools had to be sharp and reliable. Spears, bows, and traps were basic but effective. Everything had been tested by generations of trial and error. One wrong move in the snow could ruin the day, or worse, lead to real danger. The hunters often walked silently across the frozen landscape, paying attention to every detail. Footprints in the snow, the tracks of animals, the faintest movement in the distance. All of these told a story. They could determine what animals had passed, how recently, and whether it was worth following. It was like reading an ancient book written entirely in snow and ice. The wind was sometimes helpful, sometimes tricky, carrying scents and muffling sounds. Fishing through ice was another slow, careful process. Holes were cut into frozen lakes or rivers, often with stone or bone tools, and then patience was required. Fish might come slowly, testing your focus, but the reward was worth it. A warm, nourishing meal that could feed a family for hours. Even children learned to help, watching the adults and learning how to balance patience with action. Gathering plant-based food was different, but no less important. Some berries, roots, or edible shoots survived beneath the snow or in sheltered patches of the forest. People learned where these tiny resources could be found, often memorizing exact locations year after year. Gathering was slower work than hunting, but it required equal skill, observation, and knowledge of the land. Every small plant could be valuable in the frozen months. Preservation was another critical part of the process. Meat had to be smoked, dried, or buried in snow to last. Fish were often salted or dried on racks. People developed clever ways to keep food safe and edible for weeks or even months, understanding the science of freezing without realizing it. These practices weren't just practical, they were essential for survival. Cooking was slow, often done over a small, carefully managed fire. Large fires could melt roofs, smoke-filled huts, or attract predators, so everything was done in moderation. Meat might simmer for hours, turning simple ingredients into warm, comforting meals. The smell of cooked meat, the gentle bubbling of a stew, or the warmth of a bowl in one's hands was a highlight of the day. In a world where cold dominated, these small comforts mattered a great deal. Children often helped in small ways, carrying small bundles of firewood, checking traps, or stirring the pot under the watchful eye of adults. This was both education and participation. Life in snowy lands required everyone to contribute. Every action was small but important, and through these routines, children learned skills that would carry them through the harshest winters. Animals were respected, not just hunted. Hunters observed their prey closely, noting behavior, patterns, and habitats. They understood that balance was essential. Overhunting could be disastrous. The people of these lands often had rituals or quiet practices to honor the animals that fed them, acknowledging the delicate relationship between survival and respect for the natural world. Sometimes, when hunting or gathering didn't produce enough food, people would rely on stored provisions. Small caches of dried meat, smoked fish, and preserved roots could sustain a family for days. These caches were carefully hidden and rotated to prevent spoilage. This slow, methodical planning was a hallmark of life in snowy regions. Nothing was wasted, nothing was rushed. Every decision mattered. Even the smallest aspects of food preparation required attention. Sharpening tools, cutting meat into manageable pieces, boiling water, and preparing hides all fit into the rhythm of the day. Every motion, every decision was deliberate. There was no hurry, and yet every task was vital. By the time the day moved toward noon, most families had eaten their main meal, and the warmth of the fire, combined with the satisfaction of nourishing food, provided a moment of calm. Children played nearby, adults repaired tools, and the silence of snow outside created a sense of quiet security. Even in such a harsh environment, small pleasures were treasured. Life in these frozen worlds was not dramatic or thrilling in the way modern stories often suggest.
There were no sudden battles or daring feats every day. Instead, there was slow, persistent effort, careful observation, and an enduring rhythm that carried people from sunrise to sunset. The hunt, the gathering, the preparation, the sharing of food, all of these formed a steady, peaceful pattern that was both survival and comfort in a land dominated by ice and silence. As the sun moved across the pale sky, the hunters returned from their excursions, often with success, sometimes empty-handed, but always experienced. Families gathered once more, sharing what they had caught or collected, dividing it carefully, and storing any excess for future use. Meals were eaten slowly, with gratitude for warmth, fire, and sustenance. In this way, food in ancient snowy lands was more than mere nutrition. It was part of a larger rhythm of life, intertwined with the seasons, the weather, and the land itself. Every bite carried lessons of patience, observation, and cooperation. The people of these regions learned to live with the cold, and in doing so, they developed a calm resilience that shaped every part of their daily existence. By the end of the day, when the fire was low and the evening shadows stretched across the snow, people rested with full stomachs, ready to begin the next cycle of survival. Hunting, gathering, preparing, and sharing food were slow, deliberate acts that maintained life in a quiet, snowy world. And it was in this rhythm, repeated day after day, that they found comfort, community, and the small joys of survival in a land dominated by ice and silence.
Life in snowy regions demanded more than just food and shelter. It demanded tools and clothing, things we take for granted today, but that were absolutely essential for survival in the frozen world. Every tool was carefully made, every piece of clothing thoughtfully constructed. Without them, daily life would have been impossible. Clothing was perhaps the most important invention for surviving the cold. People layered fur, leather, and woven materials to trap warmth and protect themselves from biting winds. They knew which furs were best for insulation and which were better for flexibility. Each garment was crafted slowly, with attention to detail. A loose stitch could let in a draft, and in winter, a draft could be dangerous. Men, women, and children all wore multiple layers. Undergarments made of soft hides, middle layers for warmth, and outer layers to block snow and wind. Boots were thick, often stuffed with grass or moss to keep feet insulated. Gloves or mittens were crafted from fur, sometimes lined with additional materials to prevent frostbite. Hoods and scarves weren't fashion statements, they were life-saving necessities. Making these clothes required skill. People used needles made from bone or ivory to sew hides together, carefully piercing each hole so that it wouldn't tear. Tools were sharpened repeatedly to ensure they worked well. Scraps of material were saved, reused, and patched as needed. Every stitch counted. Every layer mattered. Tools themselves were equally vital. Hunting tools, cooking implements, fire-making devices, and repair tools were all made by hand. Stone and bone were shaped into knives, scrapers, and spear points. Wooden handles were carved and smoothed. Each tool was carefully tested and maintained. Broken tools could mean no food, no warmth, and sometimes no survival. Sleds and simple carriers were other essential tools. They allowed people to transport food, firewood, and supplies across deep snow without exhausting themselves. Learning to handle these devices was a skill in itself, and children often watched carefully, practicing slowly until they became proficient. Even seemingly simple tools were used with purpose. Sharpening stones, fishing hooks, and sewing awls were indispensable. A worn-out knife could mean missing a meal. A frayed rope could mean losing a sled load. Every item was treated with care and respect. Nothing was wasted, nothing was frivolous. People also used clever techniques to make life easier. Snow was sometimes used as insulation in homes or to store food. Bones were shaped to extend tools' effectiveness. Even simple items, like a hollowed-out log or a small basket, could become essential when crafted thoughtfully. In a world where nothing came easily, ingenuity was survival. The process of making tools and clothing was slow but steady. Families often worked together. A parent might carve a piece of bone while a child stretched hides. Someone tended the fire, keeping it warm enough to soften materials without overheating them. There was a rhythm in the work, a calm focus that matched the pace of life in the snow. Repairs were just as important as creating new items. Tools dulled quickly, clothes wore thin, and sleds broke under heavy loads. People learned to repair things carefully, extending their usefulness. Every repair was a lesson in patience, persistence, and resourcefulness. Even small tasks, like mending a glove or sharpening a blade, required attention, steady hands, and concentration. Clothing and tools also carried a social element. Skilled makers were respected. A well-crafted coat, a finely sharpened spear, or a perfectly sewn mitten was a mark of expertise. Elders often taught these skills to younger generations. Children learned slowly, watching and imitating, eventually becoming competent enough to contribute meaningfully to survival. The materials themselves connected people to the land. Animal hides reminded them of the creatures that provided food and warmth. Wood connected them to the forests. Stone reminded them of the mountains and rivers that shaped the landscape. In this way, tools and clothing were more than functional. They were a link to the world around them. Even the smallest details mattered. Stitches were placed to reduce drafts, knives were angled for efficiency, sleds were balanced to glide over snow. Each decision, small as it seemed, influenced comfort, survival, and daily life. People weren't just making things, they were shaping their experience of the world, one careful motion at a time. And, despite the seriousness of survival, life included quiet humor. Children sometimes played with scraps, turning useless pieces of hide into toys. Adults may have shared soft jokes while working on repairs. Even in harsh conditions, people found small ways to smile, quietly laugh, and ease the monotony of daily effort. By the end of a day filled with sewing, carving, sharpening, and repairing, people were ready to face the cold with confidence. Their clothes protected them, their tools supported them. Every action, every layer, every stitch was a promise that they could survive another day. In snowy lands, tools and clothing weren't just conveniences, they were lifelines. They allowed people to move, hunt, gather, and live with dignity and safety. They reflected skill, patience, and respect for the environment. And perhaps most importantly, they allowed families to maintain a quiet rhythm, a slow and steady pattern that matched the gentle, endless flow of winter itself. With proper clothing and reliable tools, the people of these regions could step into the day ready to hunt, gather, and interact with the frozen world around them. They faced the cold not with panic or haste, but with preparation, skill, and a calm understanding of their environment. And in that calm preparation, there was comfort, warmth, and quiet pride in doing the little things right every single day.
Travel in snowy regions was slow, careful, and essential. Unlike today, people couldn't just hop into a vehicle and drive to another village. Roads didn't exist. Snow stretched for miles, and storms could arrive without warning. Yet people still moved, and they did it with quiet skill, patience, and clever tools. The most common form of travel was walking. Snow was soft in some places and hard in others, and each step required attention.
People learned to walk lightly on powdery snow to avoid sinking too deep. On icy patches, they moved carefully, almost like performing a slow dance. Every step was deliberate, conserving energy and preventing slips that could be painful or dangerous. In deeper snow, walking alone was exhausting. People often used snowshoes, simple wooden frames strapped to their boots, sometimes covered with animal hide. Snowshoes distributed weight, allowing them to glide across soft snow rather than sinking. Using these required practice. Children learned slowly, starting with short distances before moving on to long journeys. It was a skill passed down patiently, step by step. Sleds were another important method of travel. Lightweight, sturdy, and often pulled by dogs or people, sleds made moving supplies, food, and even small children possible across long stretches of snow. Loading a sled required balance and care. Too much weight, and it would sink or tip over. Too little, and it wasted effort. People adjusted constantly, learning to read snow conditions and manage loads with quiet precision. Dogs played an essential role in travel. Not just companions, they were partners in survival. Well-trained sled dogs knew the routes, followed commands, and could sense dangers in the environment. Their energy, endurance, and loyalty allowed families to travel farther than they could on foot alone. The bond between humans and dogs was practical, but also comforting, a reminder that even in silence, companionship existed. Travel wasn't just about moving from place to place. It was about planning, observation, and preparation. People studied the weather, reading clouds and wind patterns to anticipate storms. They carried essential tools, spare clothing, and sometimes food for the journey. The goal wasn't speed, it was survival. Every movement, every step was intentional. Long journeys required rest. Travelers would pause to check sleds, adjust snowshoes, and warm hands and feet near small fires. These breaks were slow, quiet, and necessary. The rhythm of travel matched the rhythm of life in snowy regions. Deliberate, steady, and mindful. Children often traveled with adults, learning by observation and participation. They watched how adults adjusted to snow conditions, handled sleds, and used tools. They learned patience and resilience. Sometimes, the journey itself was a lesson in calmness, how to move steadily without panicking when the wind howled or visibility dropped. Travel also demanded respect for the environment. People avoided dangerous ice patches, unstable snowdrifts, and hidden crevices. They learned from previous journeys, noting landmarks, tracks, and safe paths. Navigation wasn't guided by maps or signs. It was memory, observation, and experience. Every journey reinforced knowledge, ensuring the safety of the tribe over time. The social aspect of travel was equally important. Small groups often moved together for safety. Coordination was slow and careful. People communicated quietly, signaling with subtle gestures or low voices to avoid startling animals or creating accidents. Traveling in unison required trust and attention, teaching cooperation as naturally as any game or chore. Even in the simplest trips, there were moments of quiet beauty. Sunlight sparkling off snow, the soft hush of a pine forest, or a distant mountain peak catching early light reminded travelers of the calm wonder of the world. In these moments, the harshness of the cold became a companion rather than an enemy. Observation and reflection blended with movement, creating a rhythm that matched the land itself. Winter storms added challenges to travel.
Blizzards could reduce visibility to a few steps, and strong winds could make walking nearly impossible. Travelers prepared for these by knowing when to wait, where to find temporary shelter, and how to ration energy. Patience was key. Rushing in a storm was dangerous, but waiting quietly and carefully often turned a difficult day into a safe one. Over time, routes became familiar. People knew which rivers froze first, which passes were safest, and where snow drifted too deep to cross. This knowledge was passed down through generations. It wasn't written in books or carved in stone. It lived in memories, observations, and daily practice. Learning these paths was slow but rewarding. Even mundane travel required skill. Picking the right path through soft snow, adjusting clothing layers to prevent sweat from freezing, and managing tools and sleds were all delicate, ongoing calculations. Mistakes could cost energy, comfort, or even survival. The quiet attention to detail became a natural part of life, shaping how people approached every task in their frozen world. By the end of a day's travel, families or small groups often arrived at temporary camps or returned home. They would care for sleds, check clothing, feed dogs, and share experiences from the journey. Every trip strengthened skills, reinforced social bonds, and provided material or knowledge essential for survival. Travel wasn't just a physical activity, it was a lesson, a rhythm, and a central part of life in snowy lands. Even in such harsh conditions, there was quiet humor. Slipping on ice, a dog refusing to move, or a child struggling with snowshoes might elicit soft laughter. These small moments reminded travelers that life, even in extreme cold, could be gentle and human. Humor, patience, and careful attention blended to make travel not just possible, but almost meditative. By moving slowly, watching carefully, and respecting the land, people in ancient snowy regions navigated their frozen world with grace and resilience. Travel was more than reaching a destination. It was living in harmony with nature, following a rhythm of careful observation, steady motion, and quiet reflection. It was a lesson in patience, skill, and adaptation that carried through every part of daily life.
Life in snowy regions revolved around survival, and survival revolved around finding food. Hunting and gathering weren't separate tasks. They were intertwined, forming the slow rhythm of daily life. Every step, every movement, and every decision mattered. People couldn't rush, and yet they had to be patient, observant, and persistent. Hunting began with preparation. Hunters checked their tools carefully, sharpening spear tips, inspecting bows and arrows, and making sure traps were secure. Every tool was essential. A dull spear or broken trap could mean going hungry, so attention to detail was critical. Preparation was slow, deliberate, and mindful. It was as much about focus as about physical readiness. Tracking animals required patience. Hunters studied the snow for footprints, noticing size, shape, and direction. They listened to the faint sounds of movement, observing the subtle signs that might indicate an animal was near. Sometimes the evidence was barely visible: a slight depression in snow, a disturbed branch, or a distant shadow moving across the white landscape. Reading these clues took time, experience, and careful attention. Once an animal was located, hunters moved quietly, carefully, almost like part of the landscape itself. Every step was calculated, every movement minimized sound. The cold was both a challenge and an ally. Crisp air carried scents and sounds differently, so hunters adjusted their approach accordingly. They learned to move with patience, to wait for the right moment, and to act decisively when opportunity arrived. Trapping was another key method. Traps were set along known paths or near water holes. They required careful construction and monitoring. A poorly set trap could injure an animal without providing food, or fail entirely. Hunters checked traps regularly, moving slowly, inspecting each one, and resetting or repairing as needed. Success was built on attention, care, and repeated effort. Fishing through ice was equally methodical. Holes were carefully cut into frozen rivers or lakes. Lines and hooks were prepared, baited, and lowered into the water. Waiting required patience. Sometimes hours passed before a bite, but the calm, quiet rhythm of ice fishing suited the snowy environment. The only sounds were the occasional splash, the whisper of wind, and the soft crunch of snow underfoot. Gatherings supplemented hunting. Berries, roots, and edible shoots were collected carefully. Many plants were hidden beneath snow or ice, requiring knowledge and experience to locate. People learned which areas would provide food and which plants were safe to eat. Gathering was slow, meditative work, teaching observation, patience, and respect for nature. Every small contribution mattered, as food was shared among families and tribes. Children often participated in gathering. They learned by observation, imitating adults, and performing small tasks like carrying light loads or spotting safe berries. Hunting required more skill and strength, so children observed and practiced under supervision. Slowly, over time, they developed the knowledge and ability to contribute fully. Preparing food was a careful, deliberate process. Meat was cleaned, cut, and either cooked immediately or preserved for later. Fish were dried or smoked, roots were cleaned and sometimes cooked. Fire management was essential. A too large a fire could be dangerous, while a small fire could fail to cook or dry food properly. Balance, patience, and steady attention were key. Even eating followed a slow rhythm. Meals were shared quietly, with appreciation for warmth, nourishment, and safety. Food wasn't merely sustenance, it was part of the daily pattern, a reward for careful effort, and a reminder of the connection between humans and the frozen environment. Weather shaped hunting and gathering. Storms could prevent travel, obscure animal tracks, or make rivers impassable. People adjusted patiently, waiting for the right moment, moving cautiously, and always observing. Their lives were intertwined with the environment, creating a rhythm of action and reflection. Elders played a central role in teaching and guiding hunting and gathering. They shared knowledge of animal behavior, plant cycles, and seasonal patterns. Their calm, steady instruction reinforced the slow, careful pace of life. Lessons were repeated, observed, and practiced until they became instinctual. Knowledge was a shared resource, passed gently from generation to generation. Community cooperation was essential. Hunters shared meat, gatherers distributed plants, and everyone contributed to maintaining tools, repairing shelters, and preparing for the next day. Survival depended on the tribe working as a unit, each member performing their tasks deliberately, without haste, yet with purpose. Even in the harsh cold, moments of beauty were part of the day. Watching animals move gracefully across snow, noticing sunlight glinting on ice,
or hearing the soft hush of a snowfall reminded people of the quiet elegance of their world. These small, calm experiences balanced the hard work and constant vigilance required for survival. Humor and small joys also existed. A clumsy step, a playful animal, or a child's curiosity might cause quiet laughter. Even in difficult conditions, people found ways to enjoy the day, sharing gentle amusement while staying focused on essential tasks. By the end of the day, families and groups returned home with their catch or gathered food. Tools were cleaned, food was stored, and the fire was stoked. The day's rhythm, preparation, careful movement, observation, and collaboration repeated itself in a quiet, meditative pattern. Hunting and gathering were not frantic, dramatic activities. They were slow, intentional, and deeply connected to survival and the land. In snowy regions, daily life depended on patience, skill, and awareness. The quiet rhythm of hunting and gathering shaped the people's existence. Every movement was deliberate, every decision mattered, and every small action contributed to the comfort and survival of the family. Through this slow, careful practice, communities thrived in areas that would seem harsh and unyielding and endless to outsiders. By understanding hunting and gathering, we begin to see the larger rhythm of life in snowy lands. Work, rest, preparation, and observation were balanced carefully. Life was challenging, yes, but it was also calm, purposeful, and surprisingly peaceful when approached with patience and skill. The frozen world demanded attention, but it also rewarded those who moved slowly, observed carefully, and respected the rhythm of nature.
Childhood in snowy lands was slow, careful, and filled with quiet lessons. Unlike today, where children might rush from school to games or screens, these children spent their days immersed in survival, observation, and small joys. Every moment offered a chance to learn, practice, and participate in the rhythm of life. From the earliest age, children observed their parents and elders. They watched how tools were used, how fires were tended, and how animals were tracked. They learned to notice footprints in the snow, subtle signs in the environment, and how to move carefully across ice and snow. Observation was as important as doing, and it was done at a gentle pace. Play and learning were intertwined. Children made small toys from scraps of wood, bone, or hide. They experimented with snow, learning its patterns and behaviors, sometimes creating games that mimicked the work they would eventually perform as adults. This play was quiet, deliberate, and creative. It built skills while keeping the mind and body engaged. Tasks were gradually introduced. A child might start by carrying small pieces of firewood or helping to repair clothing. Slowly they progressed to checking traps, assisting in fishing, or learning to handle simple tools. Each new responsibility was introduced carefully, with guidance from adults, and repeated practice ensured the child built competence without unnecessary risk. Patience became instinctive. Storytelling played a central role in education. Elders shared tales that blended history, lessons, and humor. These stories were calm, repetitive, and carefully paced, allowing children to absorb knowledge about survival, community, and the land. Stories also transmitted values: cooperation, patience, respect for animals, and awareness of the environment. Listening was as important as participating. Children also learn through imitation. Watching adults sew or carve or maintain sleds provided subtle lessons in technique and patience.
Mistakes were part of learning, but the pace was slow, allowing children to understand cause and effect without pressure. They learned that rushing could lead to broken tools, wasted resources, or even danger. Patience became instinctive. Daily routines offered structure. Children woke with the sun or light, helped prepare food, dressed carefully in layers, and participated in chores appropriate to their size and skill. Every day reinforced rhythm, responsibility, and connection to the community. The slow pace allowed children to develop competence while absorbing the calm patterns of adult life. Social learning was also key. Children observed interactions between adults, noting how decisions were made, how conflicts were resolved, and how cooperation maintained harmony. They learned not through lectures, but through gentle example and participation. Community life in snowy lands was interconnected, and children's education mirrored this interconnectedness. Seasonal changes added layers to childhood learning. Winters demanded more careful movement, patience in hunting, and understanding of snow and ice. Summers, when available, offered opportunities to gather plant foods, repair shelters, and explore more freely. Children experienced life across seasons, slowly internalizing the cyclical patterns of the environment. Quiet observation extended to animals as well. Children learned how deer, reindeer, or birds moved, what signs to watch for, and when to act. They gained early respect for creatures that provided food and materials, understanding their habits and importance. These lessons were practical, survival-oriented, and slowly absorbed through repeated experience. Humor and small joys were never absent. Slipping on ice, playful snowball games, or experimenting with small tools often elicited quiet laughter. Even in a harsh environment, children discovered the balance of work, observation, and gentle amusement. These small moments built resilience, patience, and a sense of wonder in the world around them. Learning wasn't rushed. Mistakes were corrected calmly, and every child progressed at their own pace. Adults provided guidance without pressure, creating an environment where curiosity, patience, and attentiveness were rewarded. Children internalized these values naturally through daily repetition and experience. By the end of childhood, young people were ready to face the frozen world with patience, competence, and calm resilience. They had learned to move carefully, observe attentively, work deliberately, and respect the rhythms of the environment. They understood that life in snowy lands required balance, care, and gentle humor. Childhood in these regions was slow, intentional, and deeply connected to survival. Children were not rushed. They learned through observation, imitation, participation, and gentle guidance. They absorbed the lessons of daily life and the wisdom of elders, becoming skilled, patient, and capable members of the community. In this way, generations were prepared for life in snowy lands. Childhood was not separate from the rhythm of survival. It was embedded within it. Every day, every task, every small moment contributed to competence, calmness, and resilience. Through slow learning, observation, and participation, children became part of the ongoing cycle of life, rhythm, and quiet survival in a world of snow and silence.
Life in snowy regions followed the rhythm of the seasons. The long winters and brief summers shaped every task, every movement, and every plan. Adults carefully balanced work, rest, and preparation to survive and thrive in a frozen world. Daily life wasn't rushed or chaotic. It was deliberate, calm, and rooted in understanding the environment. Winter was the time for maintaining what they already had. Food preservation, repairing clothing, and tending the fire were daily necessities. People moved slowly, focusing on tasks that could be done indoors or near shelter. The cold dictated their routines, and they adapted naturally, letting the environment guide the pace. Even the simplest tasks, like mending a coat or sharpening a knife, required attention and care. Hunting continued through winter, but it required patience and strategy. Deep snow and harsh weather slowed movement, so adults planned carefully. They set traps, observed animal patterns, and coordinated with others to maximize efficiency. Everyone had a role. While some hunted or checked traps, others prepared food, repaired tools, or maintained shelters. Cooperation was constant, quiet, and purposeful. Summer brought a change in rhythm. Snow melted, rivers flowed freely, and plant foods became available. Adults spent more time outdoors, gathering resources, repairing larger structures, and teaching children skills that required more space or less cold. Tasks that had been impossible in winter, such as cutting logs, collecting berries, or mending large items, became priorities. The pace was still calm, but there was more room for movement and exploration. Seasonal work was planned carefully. Adults had to anticipate the coming winter during the brief summer months. Food, clothing, and tools had to be prepared and stored. Mistakes could be costly. Every action was deliberate. Gathering enough resources, repairing shelters, and teaching essential skills were all part of a long-term plan that ensured survival. Daily responsibilities were shared across the community. Adults coordinated tasks with neighbors, dividing work according to skills and strengths. Some focused on hunting or fishing, others on clothing, food storage, or tool maintenance. Even cooking was part of this rhythm. Meals were prepared slowly, using preserved foods from winter or fresh resources from summer. Everyone contributed, and every contribution mattered. Managing time was essential. Sunlight hours dictated movement, especially in winter when days were short. Adults adjusted tasks to match the light, completing what could be done safely and saving other work for the next day. The pace was steady, never frantic. Each day had a purpose, and tasks flowed naturally from one to the next. The long winters allowed for reflection and planning. Adults used quieter moments to teach children, repair tools, and refine skills. These slow activities reinforced patience and observation, qualities necessary for survival. Even storytelling and song were part of seasonal life, providing comfort, cultural continuity, and subtle lessons in survival and cooperation. Weather always influenced work. Storms could halt travel or hunting, forcing adults to focus on indoor tasks. Clear days were used for outdoor activities. People learned to read the sky, wind, and snow conditions, letting nature guide decisions. Life was a collaboration with the environment, a steady dance of adjustment and careful observation. Resource management was a central responsibility. Adults ensured that food was stored safely,
tools were maintained, and clothing was in good condition. They also monitored animal populations, taking only what was needed to preserve balance. Conservation and foresight were not philosophical, they were practical, slow, and necessary for survival. Even small daily chores fit into the larger rhythm of seasonal life. Carrying firewood, melting snow for water, repairing sleds, and tending animals all contributed to the cycle. Each act was small, deliberate, and meaningful. Adults approached these tasks calmly, understanding that steady attention over time was more effective than rushing. Social structure reinforced this calm rhythm. Elders provided guidance, sharing knowledge of seasonal patterns and survival techniques. Adults collaborated to ensure everyone had the support needed to complete their responsibilities. Children gradually learned the rhythm of life, observing, practicing, and participating as appropriate. Despite the harsh environment, moments of quiet beauty were never absent. Sunlight reflecting on snow, gentle breezes in the forest, or the soft sound of flowing water reminded people of the calm, meditative qualities of their world. These moments balanced labor, reinforcing patience, reflection, and a sense of connection to the environment. Humor and small joys persisted. A playful slip on ice, a dog tugging at a sled, or a child discovering a hidden patch of berries could bring soft laughter. These small instances of amusement reinforced social bonds, eased tension, and reminded people that life, even in extreme cold, had gentle pleasures. By observing seasons, managing time, and distributing responsibilities calmly, adults maintained the slow, steady rhythm of life. Each task, from hunting to sewing, had its place within the larger pattern. Work, rest, learning, and reflection all blended into a continuous cycle that allowed communities to survive and even thrive in frozen landscapes. The long, deliberate patterns of seasonal work created stability. Adults acted with foresight, patience, and skill. Children absorbed these lessons naturally, internalizing the rhythm of life. Communities survived not through haste or strength alone, but through careful planning, cooperation, and steady attention to the details of each day and each season. In this way, seasonal work was more than labor. It was a framework for calm, steady living. It balanced survival with reflection, responsibility with care, and effort with patience. Life in snowy lands demanded attention to rhythm, and adults maintained that rhythm through deliberate, careful, and cooperative action.
Even in harsh, frozen environments, communities found ways to gather, share, and celebrate. Life was difficult, but small rituals, gatherings, and routines helped people stay connected and maintain a sense of meaning. These quiet, deliberate practices were part of the rhythm of daily life, adding warmth and comfort to otherwise cold days. Community gatherings were often tied to survival and seasonal work. People shared food, repaired tools together, and collaborated on construction projects like shelters or storage spaces. These activities weren't rushed or noisy. They were calm, steady, and focused. Everyone had a role, and everyone contributed. Working together built not only efficiency, but trust and social bonds. Meals were central to community life.
When hunting or gathering was successful, families shared resources. Large fires sometimes burned, around which people gathered to cook and eat. Stories were told, experiences were exchanged, and children watched and listened carefully. The act of sharing food reinforced the idea that survival depended on cooperation and mutual support. Rituals often marked important events in the year. Solstices, the first snowfall, or the return of certain animals might be observed in quiet ceremonies. These rituals were simple: lighting a fire, offering thanks, or performing small symbolic actions. But they carried deep significance. They reminded people of their place in the natural world, reinforced communal values, and provided a sense of continuity across generations. Music and storytelling were essential. Elders told tales slowly, with repetition and rhythm, that helped children remember lessons and histories. Songs were soft and steady, accompanying daily tasks or evening gatherings. These practices weren't entertainment in the modern sense. They were a way of transmitting culture, history, and knowledge, while maintaining calm and focus. Children participated in these rituals and gatherings. They learned the stories, helped with small tasks, and absorbed the rhythm of communal life. Learning social norms, customs, and cooperation was as important as learning hunting, gathering, or tool-making. Even small gestures mattered. Sharing a portion of preserved food, helping someone with clothing repairs, or guiding a child safely across snow reinforced social bonds. Each act, no matter how minor it seemed, contributed to community cohesion. Life in snowy lands required cooperation. Survival depended on quiet, deliberate teamwork. Humor and gentle play were also present. During shared work or storytelling, small moments of laughter lightened the mood. A child slipping on ice, a playful animal, or a funny story provided relief from harsh conditions. These simple joys balanced the seriousness of survival, reminding people that life had softness even in a frozen world. Animals often featured in rituals or daily gatherings. People acknowledged the creatures that provided food, fur, and companionship. Quiet offerings, careful handling, and respectful practices reinforced a connection to the natural world. Survival depended on observing patterns, respecting resources, and maintaining balance between humans and animals. These practices strengthened community identity and understanding of the environment. Seasonal festivals were subtle but meaningful. The return of sunlight after long winters, the first thaw of rivers, or the migration of animals might be observed with calm gatherings. Fires, songs, stories, and shared meals marked these occasions. People recognized change, celebrated continuity, and honored the cycles of nature. Even in small, quiet ways, they found joy and reassurance. Communities also had practical gatherings. Repairing shelters, sharpening tools, and preparing for storms were often group activities. These tasks required coordination, attention, and patience. While functional, they also reinforced social ties. People learned from each other, taught younger members, and strengthened trust. Work and ritual were intertwined, blending survival with calm social engagement. Respect for elders and knowledge keepers was central. Their guidance during gatherings and rituals ensured that traditions, wisdom, and survival techniques were transmitted accurately. Adults and children alike participated in these quiet, structured moments, reinforcing the rhythm of communal life. Learning was embedded in activity, not separate from it. The daily rhythm of community life combined work, teaching, rituals, and small joys. It was deliberate and slow. People moved carefully, observed attentively, and celebrated subtly. Nothing was rushed. Every action contributed to survival, cohesion, and a sense of continuity. In a harsh, frozen environment, this rhythm created stability and comfort. Even solitary moments within communal life held significance. Watching the sunset on snow, tending a small fire, or quietly observing animals offered reflection and calm. People were connected to the community and the environment simultaneously. Life in snowy lands balanced interaction, observation, and introspection, creating a slow, steady pattern of living. Through these rituals and gatherings, communities maintained cultural memory and social stability. Stories, songs, shared meals, and celebrations reinforced values of cooperation, patience, respect, and attentiveness. Children absorbed these lessons naturally. Adults upheld them consistently. The rhythm of life, slow, deliberate, and communal, ensured survival and continuity. Even in a harsh, frozen world, small joys and shared traditions provided warmth. People found comfort in calm activity, cooperation, and the gentle repetition of rituals. They learned to balance work and play, reflection and action, survival and enjoyment. Life was slow, deliberate, and meaningful. By maintaining these communal rhythms, snowy land communities not only survived, but also cultivated resilience, cultural continuity, and quiet satisfaction. They understood that survival depended on careful observation, steady effort, and cooperative living. Rituals and gatherings created a sense of belonging, comfort, and connection to the frozen world around them.
Shelter in snowy regions was more than just a roof over one's head. It was life itself. The cold could be relentless, and without proper protection, survival was impossible. Homes were carefully designed, built, and maintained to provide warmth, safety, and comfort in a harsh environment. Building a home began with observation of the land. People chose sites that offered natural protection from wind, snowdrifts, and storms. Valleys, slight rises, or areas near forests provided natural barriers. Choosing a location required patience, knowledge, and understanding of the seasonal behavior of snow and ice. Every decision mattered. Materials were gathered carefully. Wood, stone, ice, and animal hides were the primary resources. Wood formed frames, stone reinforced walls or foundations, and hides or thatch covered gaps to keep the wind and cold out. Each piece was selected, shaped, and placed deliberately. Efficiency and durability were more important than speed. Construction was slow, steady work. Families often built together, dividing tasks according to skill and strength. Adults lifted and positioned beams, secured coverings, and reinforced weak points. Children helped by carrying small materials, holding items, or performing minor tasks under supervision. Every movement was deliberate to prevent accidents and ensure longevity. The interiors were designed to retain warmth. Fire pits or central hearths were positioned carefully to heat the space without causing smoke hazards. Rocks, packed snow, or compacted earth sometimes served as insulation beneath floors. Walls were thickened with layers of materials to reduce drafts. Homes were practical, cozy, and thoughtfully constructed to make life in extreme cold manageable. Furniture was minimal but purposeful. Low platforms, raised beds, and storage areas kept essentials off the cold floor. Every item served a clear function, and comfort was balanced with efficiency. People used what they had carefully, valuing durability over decoration. Even small touches, like layering hides for sitting or sleeping, added warmth and subtle comfort. Fire management was essential. A carefully tended fire provided heat for cooking, warmth for bodies, and light in long, dark winters. Too much fire could be dangerous. Too little could be deadly. People monitored flames, adjusted fuel, and positioned stones or barriers to control heat and safety. Attention, calmness, and experience made this task second nature. Lighting was simple. Torches, oil lamps, or small fires provided dim, steady illumination. Bright light was rare in snowy interiors. This subdued glow contributed to the calm, quiet rhythm of home life. People moved slowly, spoke softly, and maintained routines at a pace that suited the enclosed, warm space. Storage was another vital consideration. Food, clothing, tools, and other essentials were carefully organized. Items were elevated, insulated, or packed to last through storms or long winters. Every bit of space was used efficiently. Loss or spoilage could be dangerous, so homes were maintained with patience, careful attention, and regular inspection. Children learned home management gradually. They helped gather firewood, prepare bedding, or assist in cooking. These small responsibilities taught them skills, patience, and observation. The rhythm of daily home life became second nature, preparing them for adult responsibilities. Homes were training grounds as much as shelters. Community knowledge influenced home design. Techniques, materials, and layouts were shared among families. Elders advised on placement, insulation, and fire management. Skills were transmitted slowly through observation, participation, and repeated practice. Over time, homes improved in efficiency, warmth, and safety. Even within the home, people valued calm and quiet. Harsh environments outside encouraged indoor focus. Tasks were performed deliberately, and life was structured around slow rhythms. Cooking, repairing, mending, and resting were all done with attention to detail, reinforcing patience and mindfulness. Small comforts mattered. Soft hides, warm water, and shared meals created a sense of safety and calm. Storytelling and gentle laughter filled the space, balancing the seriousness of survival with human connection. Inside, warmth wasn't just physical, it was emotional and social. Homes were havens from the cold, nurturing both body and spirit. Weather influenced indoor routines. Storms might keep families inside for days, creating longer periods of shared tasks, storytelling, and quiet reflection. Clear days allowed preparation, outdoor chores, or social visits. Life in a snowy world required flexibility, patience,
and an ability to adapt routines to changing conditions. Maintenance was ongoing. Roofs were reinforced, walls patched, and fires tended daily. People moved slowly but deliberately, checking for gaps, weak points, or moisture. Every small repair contributed to comfort and survival. Nothing was taken for granted, and care became second nature. Even in a harsh environment, moments of beauty existed indoors. Watching sunlight filter through cracks in walls, the flicker of firelight on hides, or the quiet sound of a child's laughter provided gentle pleasure. These moments reminded people of the calm, meditative qualities of their world and reinforced resilience. By understanding how homes were built, maintained, and used, we see the balance of practicality, patience, and comfort. Life in snowy regions depended on careful planning, steady effort, and respect for the environment. Homes were the center of this rhythm, a place where survival, learning, and quiet joy came together. Through slow, deliberate construction and daily care, people created warmth, safety, and comfort. Every element of a home, fire, insulation, storage, furniture, was essential. Every action, no matter how small, contributed to the steady rhythm of survival. Life inside the home mirrored the larger world, patient, intentional, and deeply connected to the frozen environment outside.
Long winters in snowy regions were challenging. Days were short, sunlight was scarce, and the cold was relentless. People had to adjust their routines, pace themselves.
Long winters in snowy regions were challenging. Days were short, sunlight was scarce, and the cold was relentless. People had to adjust their routines, pace themselves, and find ways to maintain calm, energy, and focus. Life slowed naturally, and a deliberate rhythm became essential for survival and well-being. Sleep patterns were influenced by limited light. People often rose with the faint daylight and went to bed early, using the long night to rest and conserve energy. Inside their homes, they layered hides and furs, creating warmth and comfort that allowed for longer, deeper sleep. Sleep wasn't rushed or irregular. It was deliberate, providing restoration for the long, cold days. Daily routines followed the rhythm of light, weather, and necessity. Tasks were prioritized carefully. Food preparation, fire tending, tool maintenance, and clothing repairs were performed during the hours when light allowed safe work. Time was measured not by clocks, but by natural cues, the sun's position, the temperature, or even animal behavior. People adapted mentally to the long darkness. Quiet activities were valued. Storytelling, repairing tools, sewing, and planning for the next day or season. These slow, focused tasks filled time productively while conserving energy. Patience and observation became natural habits reinforced by the environment. Meals were structured around warmth and energy needs. Hot soups, dried meats, and other preserved foods sustained people, providing nutrition and comfort. Preparing and eating food was a calm ritual, offering a sense of normalcy even when the world outside was harsh and unchanging. Shared meals also reinforced family and community bonds, softening the isolation that long winters could bring. Physical activity was adjusted to maintain warmth and energy. Walking, snowshoeing, or sledging continued, but at a measured pace. People avoided overexertion in the cold, balancing effort with conservation. Even indoor chores were performed deliberately, preventing fatigue while maintaining essential routines. Children followed the same rhythms. They learned to manage energy, observe cues from adults, and participate in indoor tasks. Play was quieter, more focused, and often involved skills that prepared them for future survival. The long winters were an extension of education, teaching patience, observation, and calmness naturally over time. Mental resilience was important. Long periods without sunlight could be difficult, but people used rhythm, routine, and gentle social interaction to maintain stability. Storytelling, quiet laughter, and soft music offered comfort. Elders shared wisdom and advice, helping younger generations navigate both the physical and emotional challenges of winter. Resource management was critical during long winters. Food, firewood, and tools had to be carefully rationed and maintained. Adults monitored stores daily, planning for days when hunting or gathering was impossible. Every action was intentional, balancing immediate needs with future security. Carelessness could have serious consequences, so attentiveness and deliberate pacing were essential. Even in the darkest months, there were moments of subtle beauty. Moonlight on snow, stars reflected on frozen lakes, or the faint glow of firelight inside a home provided calm, quiet pleasure. People observed these small wonders with care, allowing them to reinforce mental resilience and appreciation for their environment. Social connections were maintained quietly. Families and small groups interacted, shared tasks, and supported each other. Collaboration reduced isolation and ensured that no one had to face the winter alone. Even small gestures, offering a piece of food, assisting with firewood, or sharing a story, strengthened bonds and created emotional warmth. Humor and gentle amusement persisted. Children played with snow indoors, adults exchanged soft jokes, and pets or dogs provided companionship. These small joys balanced the monotony and hardship of long winters, keeping spirits calm and cooperative. Laughter was quiet but meaningful, a reminder of life's persistence even in challenging conditions. Planning was a natural part of winter routines. Adults anticipated the arrival of spring, the thaw of rivers, and the availability of new food sources. They prepared tools, repaired shelters, and trained children for upcoming seasonal work. This careful planning reinforced calmness, focus, and a sense of continuity, connecting the present with future needs. Daily life in long winters emphasized mindfulness. People learned to observe, move deliberately, and act with intention. Every task, from chopping wood to mending clothing, was performed with attention. The slow, repetitive nature of winter life fostered patience, resilience, and calmness,
creating a steady rhythm that carried people through the harsh months. Even in isolation, there was comfort. Firelight, warm clothing, preserved food, and quiet routines offered a sense of security. People developed awareness of their bodies, energy, and limits. They rested when necessary, acted when needed, and moved deliberately to maintain balance in both physical and mental health. By the end of the long winter, communities emerged with skill, patience, and quiet resilience. The harsh months reinforced habits of observation, cooperation, and deliberate action. People learned to thrive in rhythm with the environment, maintaining calm and stability through careful planning, slow work, and gentle social support. Through long, dark winters, people in snowy lands cultivated a quiet and steady way of life. Sleep, routines, observation, and cooperation formed the backbone of survival. Even in extreme cold and limited light, life retained warmth, purpose, and subtle joy. Winter taught patience, mindfulness, and the importance of steady effort, preparing communities for the rhythms of the year ahead.
Spring in snowy regions was a quiet celebration of life, renewal, and hope. After long months of cold, darkness, and slow routines, the arrival of warmth and sunlight brought changes to the landscape, the rhythm of daily life, and the hearts of the people who lived there. The first signs of spring were subtle. Small patches of snow melted, tiny green shoots appeared through the thawing ground, and streams began to flow again. Birds returned, insects re-emerged, and the air carried sense of life waking from its winter sleep. People observed these changes carefully, knowing that each small sign marked new opportunities and challenges. Daily routines shifted naturally. Tasks that had been impossible during winter, gathering plants, repairing larger structures, preparing for long journeys, were now possible. People moved outdoors more frequently, taking advantage of daylight, softer ground, and milder temperatures. The pace was still calm and deliberate, but there was more freedom and opportunity for movement. Hunting patterns changed. Animals that had been harder to track in deep snow now moved differently. Streams, thawed rivers, and budding forests created new habitats and pathways. Hunters adjusted carefully, observing tracks, listening to new sounds, and planning movements with patience. Even in renewal, the rhythm of careful observation, quiet strategy, and cooperation remained central. Gathering became a major focus. Edible shoots, roots, and early berries provided fresh nutrition. Adults taught children to identify plants, avoid poisonous ones, and understand seasonal cycles. Learning continued gradually, embedded in action and observation. Children practiced patience, attention, and skill, contributing to family survival while absorbing the rhythm of nature's renewal. Repairing and improving shelters became a priority. Winter may have damaged roofs, walls, or storage areas. Spring allowed people to reinforce, rebuild, or expand structures. Wood, stone, and hides were gathered and prepared with care. Work was deliberate, ensuring that homes would withstand future seasons. Every task reinforced calmness, planning, and attention to detail.
Spring also marked a time for social gathering. Communities came together more often, sharing news, resources, and labor. Small celebrations, quiet rituals, and storytelling reinforced cultural continuity and cooperation. Even in practical work, social bonds were maintained, creating a gentle balance between labor and leisure. Fire management shifted as well. Indoor fires became less essential, but warmth remained important for cooking and comfort during chilly nights. People adjusted gradually, balancing heat, fuel, and ventilation as the environment changed. Learning to live with fluctuating temperatures was part of the rhythm of spring. Small joys were abundant. Children played outdoors, exploring thawed streams and budding forests. Families noticed animals returning, the brightening sky and the soft warmth of the sun. These observations were quiet, calm, and deliberate. Nature itself provided gentle entertainment and lessons, reinforcing patience, observation, and appreciation for the environment. Spring offered opportunities for teaching and practice. Adults demonstrated new techniques for fishing, trapping, and gathering. Children observed, imitated, and slowly learned. Every season brought different lessons, and spring emphasized adaptability, planning, and attentive participation. Knowledge accumulated gradually, preparing the community for the next cycle of life. Humor and gentle amusement were present in outdoor activity. A child slipping in mud, a playful animal chasing a trail, or a soft breeze scattering leaves brought smiles and laughter. These moments balanced work and learning, reinforcing social bonds and mental resilience. Even small joys were celebrated quietly, in harmony with the calm pace of life. Resource management remained important. Food, tools, and materials were assessed, repaired, or replenished. Adults planned ahead, considering both immediate needs and future challenges. Attention to detail, careful observation, and calm decision-making ensured that the community remained prepared even as the season shifted. Rituals marked spring's arrival. Small ceremonies, symbolic gestures, or shared meals acknowledged the end of winter and the return of life. Elders guided these practices, teaching lessons in continuity, respect for nature, and appreciation for survival. Children participated gradually, observing first, then helping, internalizing cultural memory and rhythm. Life in spring was a balance of reflection and action. People moved more, worked outdoors, and interacted socially, but everything remained deliberate. The rhythm of life, careful observation, steady effort, patience, and calm continued to guide daily activities. Even renewal required attention and intentionality. By the end of spring, communities were ready for the full activity of summer. Tools were repaired, food sources were replenished, shelters were strengthened, and young people were more skilled and confident. The lessons of winter had been applied, refined, and integrated into daily life. Renewal was not chaotic. It was the result of deliberate preparation, observation, and steady effort. Spring reminded people of the cycle of life. Harsh winters gave way to warmth, scarcity led to abundance, and patience was rewarded with opportunity. The frozen world transformed gradually, but the rhythm of calm, steady living persisted through every season. People had learned to live in harmony with their environment, balancing survival, reflection, social connection, and quiet joy. In snowy regions, spring was more than a season. It was a reward for patience, a lesson in observation, and a gentle transition into the active months ahead. The community, strengthened by winter's challenges, embraced renewal with calm focus, deliberate action, and a quiet appreciation for the continuity of life. And so, life continued its slow, steady rhythm through snow, cold, long nights, and the gentle warmth of spring, teaching patience, resilience, and the art of living deliberately in a world shaped by nature's quiet, enduring patterns.